President Trump stands at a podium declaring victory over affordability. But behind closed doors, a very different story is unfolding. Major American corporations, Levi's, Columbia Sportswear, McCormick, are preparing to raise prices significantly. The reason? The highest tariffs America has seen in a century. Meanwhile, American workers are experiencing the slowest wage growth in 5 years, barely outpacing inflation. And as if that wasn't enough, the Trump family is filing trademarks on airports bearing the president's name, airports he's personally pressuring lawmakers to rename after him. Eric Trump is investing in Israeli defense contractors, while his father oversees the Pentagon. Crypto executives gather at Mar-a-Lago with Goldman Sachs and government officials in tow. The question isn't just about economics anymore. It's about whether the American presidency has become a family business venture, and whether everyday Americans will be left footing the bill while their spending power evaporates. This isn't just a news story. This is a collision course between political promises and economic reality, between public service and private profit. And the consequences are already arriving at your doorstep. Let's start with what should be a warning alarm for every American household: the affordability crisis that's intensifying, not improving. President Trump has declared victory over affordability concerns, but the reality painted by corporate America tells a starkly different story. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, businesses across the spectrum, from iconic brands like Levi's and Columbia Sportswear to everyday staples like McCormick spices, are planning significant price hikes. These aren't minor adjustments. These are substantial increases designed specifically to offset one thing: the crushing impact of high tariffs. Let's put this in perspective. Former Treasury official and law professor Natasha Stern points out that in January of last year, the effective tariff rate facing American companies hovered around 2.5%. Today, it's rocketed to approximately 16.5%. That represents the highest tariff levels the United States has experienced at any point in the last century. Think about that. We're living through a trade policy more restrictive than anything seen in modern American economic history. These tariffs function as a tax, not on foreign countries, as often claimed, but directly on American consumers. You are paying this tax every time you purchase affected goods. And while some businesses initially tried to absorb these costs by importing goods before tariff implementation or eating into their profit margins, that strategy has reached its breaking point. As one executive candidly told the Wall Street Journal, "It is not sustainable for us to tolerate that kind of increase without some sort of concession from our consumers." But here's the devastating counterpoint. It's also not sustainable for consumers to pay higher prices when their own spending power is collapsing. And that's exactly what's happening. New data from the Department of Labor reveals that wages for private sector employees rose just over 3% in the fourth quarter of last year. That marks the smallest wage increase in 5 years. Even more concerning, this growth rate sits only half a percentage point above inflation. In real terms, American workers are barely treading water, and for many, they're actually falling behind. Financial Times contributing editor Brendan Greeley highlights an even more troubling dimension to this wage crisis. In the period immediately following the pandemic, the United States experienced genuine, real wage growth, and critically, that growth was concentrated at the bottom of the earning distribution. The Americans who earned the least saw the highest wage increases. That was genuine economic progress for working families. But that trend has now completely inverted. Today, the people who make the least money in America are seeing the least wage growth. The workers who can least afford price increases are simultaneously experiencing the weakest income gains. Greeley's assessment is blunt. That's a real problem, and that is not sustainable in any way. This creates a vicious economic squeeze: prices rising, wages stagnating, spending power evaporating. So why has it taken this long for these price increases to fully materialize? Natasha Stern explains that many businesses engaged in what's called front-loading, rushing to import goods at lower tariff rates before new policies took effect. This allowed them to temporarily forestall passing costs to consumers. But those inventories are now depleted. The buffer is gone. And this is precisely why so many small businesses, operations without the capital reserves to engage in sophisticated import timing strategies, shut their doors last year. They simply couldn't afford to absorb the tariff burden. Brendan Greeley frames this moment as the end of the uncertainty phase. For the past year, businesses operated in a fog of not knowing how serious or permanent the tariff regime would be. There were moments, particularly toward the end of last year, when confidence emerged that perhaps President Trump was moving past his tariff phase, that prices might stabilize. That hope has been extinguished. It's now crystal clear that tariffs are not just policy for this administration. They're a tool the president finds enjoyable to wield, a perpetual negotiating instrument regardless of whether they actually achieve the stated goal of bringing back manufacturing jobs. The uncertainty is over. The certainty now is that this tariff regime is permanent, and American businesses and consumers must adapt to that new reality. But the economic pressures don't stop with tariffs and stagnant wages. The labor market itself is under serious strain from multiple directions simultaneously. For an extended period, the American economy has been characterized by what economists call a no hire, no fire dynamic. A strange stasis where job growth essentially stalled outside of sectors like healthcare and possibly education. No significant job creation, but also no wave of layoffs. A holding pattern. But that equilibrium is now destabilizing. The combination of tariff-induced costs and what Natasha Cern describes as broader macroeconomic uncertainties is creating conditions where wage growth isn't just slowing for workers at the bottom of the income distribution. Those workers now face the very real prospect that their jobs may not exist in the same form going forward. The threat of mass displacement looms, particularly as productivity gains from artificial intelligence begin to materialize. And here's the cruel irony. The workers most vulnerable to AI displacement are the same workers experiencing the weakest wage growth and facing the highest proportional burden from tariff-driven price increases. Meanwhile, the economic winners from AI will disproportionately be concentrated at the top of the income distribution. Cern's conclusion is stark. These are the types of things that are going to make concerns about affordability in this economy worse, not better. So that's the economic landscape: deteriorating affordability, compressed wages, labor market vulnerability. Now let's turn to the other dimension of this story, one that raises profound questions about governance, ethics, and the fundamental relationship between public office and private profit. The question we find ourselves asking with disturbing frequency: is the White House for sale? The Trump family business has officially filed for trademark rights covering any airports using the president's name. These applications seek exclusive rights to use the Trump name not only on airports themselves, but on dozens of products and services found at airports: buses, umbrellas, travel bags, and more. The Trump Organization's defense is straightforward. They're not seeking profit from these trademarks. They merely want to protect against what they characterize as bad actors who might misuse the Trump name. But context matters enormously here. These trademark filings came just 1 week after President Trump personally pressured lawmakers to rename 2 major American airports after him: New York's Penn Station and Washington's Dulles Airport. And these filings arrived on the exact same day that the Florida House voted to rename the Palm Beach Airport after the president. This raises a question that should trouble anyone concerned with conflicts of interest. If Palm Beach or Dulles changes its name to Trump, will those airports need to pay Trump for using that name? Will public infrastructure be required to license a sitting president's trademark? Brendan Greeley's response cuts to the heart of the matter. I can't believe we're discussing this on the merits. There's no precedent for this whatsoever. And while we say that night after night covering this administration, it bears repeating because the sheer volume of norm violations can create a dangerous numbness. We risk accepting the unacceptable simply through repetition. Greeley continues, "We have never had a president that is a bottomless pit of need. The Trump family's business model has long ago shifted from actual real estate development to licensing the Trump name for others to use on their projects. This is familiar commercial territory for them. So when the Trump organization claims they won't profit from airport naming rights, Greeley poses the essential question: can you think of a single opportunity to profit that the Trump family has not used since they got into office? The evidence suggests the answer is no. But the airport trademarks are merely one thread in a much larger tapestry of potential conflicts of interest and monetization of public office. Eric Trump, the president's second son, is investing money in an Israeli drone manufacturer as part of a $1.5 billion deal to take the company public. He is making this investment at the precise moment his father oversees the United States Department of Defense, the single largest purchaser of military equipment on Earth, including drones. Natasha Cern, drawing on analysis from the New York Times editorial board, notes that by one tally, the president has profited to the tune of approximately $1.4 billion over the course of his first year in this second administration. And that figure may actually be significantly higher at this point. Why does this matter beyond the obvious appearance of self-dealing? Cern puts on what she calls her law professor hat to explain. We are a country that is governed by rule of law. The concern isn't merely these specific deals with foreign governments and business arrangements in isolation. The deeper threat is systemic degradation. This is an administration where the president is interested in suing his own IRS, meaning he would be sitting on both sides of negotiations with the Department of Justice. The concern is that this pattern is corrosive to the integrity of American institutions in ways that will prove long-lasting and extraordinarily difficult to reverse. The administration also seeks to weaken laws, disregard regulations, or eliminate them entirely in service of businesses in which they're personally involved. This represents a fundamental corruption of the regulatory state's purpose. And then there's the crypto dimension. Eric Trump, along with his brother Donald Trump Jr., are hosting a cryptocurrency forum at Mar-a-Lago. The event is being headlined by the heads of Goldman Sachs and the Nasdaq. Multiple Trump appointees, sitting government officials, are scheduled to appear. Have we ever seen anything remotely like this? A private family business venture hosted at the president's personal property, featuring senior executives from major financial institutions and members of the current administration, focused on a largely unregulated financial sector? Brendan Greeley offers a clarifying translation. Crypto is a fancy word for finance without regulation. There's nothing fundamentally new about cryptocurrency technology from a financial function perspective. We've seen all of these mechanisms before in traditional finance. The only genuine difference is the absence of regulatory oversight. When you hear the word crypto, Greeley suggests, just think finance without regulation. There's a group of people operating outside traditional banking who benefit from that regulatory vacuum because it's a cheap way to raise money. The Trump family recognized early in this administration that they could profit from this sector. And now, through laws passed by Congress, these methods of raising money with minimal regulation and oversight are being extended to traditional banks as well. As Greeley describes it, this is a debutante ball for crypto, where the banks are invited in as well. The banks have recognized we're going to go to where the regulation isn't, and where the regulation isn't is crypto. So let's step back and see the full picture that emerges. American families are facing the highest tariffs in a century, driving significant price increases across consumer goods. Wage growth has slowed to the weakest pace in 5 years, barely keeping ahead of inflation, with workers at the bottom of the income distribution hit hardest. The labor market faces mounting pressure from both trade policy uncertainty and the looming displacement effects of artificial intelligence. Small businesses are closing because they cannot absorb tariff costs, and simultaneously, the Trump family is systematically monetizing the presidency through airport name trademarks, defense contractor investments, and cryptocurrency ventures hosted at the president's private club with government officials in attendance. These are not separate stories. They are interconnected dimensions of a broader transformation in how political power and private profit interact in America. The president declares victory over affordability while corporations prepare price hikes. The president pressures lawmakers to rename airports after him, while his business files trademarks on those same names. The president's son invests in defense contractors while his father commands the Pentagon. Government officials appear at private family cryptocurrency events while regulations are systematically dismantled. The economic pain is real and measurable, in grocery bills, in stagnant paychecks, in closed storefronts. The institutional degradation is harder to quantify, but potentially more consequential for the long-term health of American governance. One executive said absorbing tariff costs is not sustainable. But it's equally not sustainable for consumers to pay higher prices while losing spending power. And it's certainly not sustainable for a democratic republic to function when the line between public service and private enrichment becomes this blurred, or disappears entirely. The question facing America isn't just economic, it's constitutional. It's about what we will accept as normal and what we recognize as a fundamental departure from the principles that are supposed to govern public office. The decisions being made now, on trade, on wages, on conflicts of interest, on regulatory integrity, will shape the economic reality and institutional landscape of this country for years to come. And the costs of those decisions are already arriving.